Hello and welcome to the Kaspersky Security Symposium here in Munich, Germany. I'm here with Vitaly Kamluk, Chief Security Expert, Kaspersky Lab, Japan, and a member of the Global Research and Analysis team. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the roadblocks and ways in which security researchers and anti-malware groups around the world are really hamstrung by legal issues and some of the laws surrounding what you can and can't do when it comes to attempting to disinfect botnets and dealing with some of the bigger problems on the internet. And Vitaly, I want to start with Conficker, which was a big global epidemic. And security researchers were able, in some cases, to mitigate the threat in some ways. But you ran into some roadblocks legally. So just talk me through a little bit about the attempts to do the cleanup and some of the problems you had when it came to dealing with the law.
Okay, yeah, as many people know, the Conficker was one of the biggest botnets on the internet, and it appeared last year and grew very fast. And it's alive even now, currently on the internet, according to the data from configurworkinggroup.org. There is over 5 million of infected machines that are sitting out there on the internet and waiting for the command of the bad guys. And there were many attempts to block the control of those machines, of that botnet. But the most difficult part was with the latest variant of Conficker, where in opposite to the previous variants, it switched from centralized structure into so-called peer-to-peer botnet. This is where the infected hosts are connecting one to another and propagating the command from the master. So we analyzed that implementation, and we found that it was almost perfect, and there was no way to take over the botnet, and there was no central node to shut it down and make sure that the botnet cannot be controlled. Because it had no head, it was totally peer-to-peer. So what we could do, we found that there is a way of converting the structure by sending special packets to the infected machines. We could change the structure of the botnet from peer-to-peer chaotic communication into something centralized. And the central node could belong to us, not the bad guys. That technically means that we still cannot control the botnet, but we can make sure that all the bots are connected to us and us only, and the bad guys cannot control the botnet. But unfortunately, these actions are illegal because this requires sending specially crafted packets, and in many countries that can be interpreted as illegal action, so we couldn't do that.
We also had another example with Gumblar, which is dealing with a lot of web-based infections. Talk to us a little bit about, again, some of the issues you had around mitigating Gumblar.
Yeah, Gumblar is another interesting example where we couldn't go further just because of the limitations made by the law. And Gumblar involves server botnet and the client botnet, and these two botnets are interacting and exchanging information, and this is why they can grow. So if you remove one of the botnets, the other will just probably die and will not be efficient. So we found that every server that is compromised by Gumblar has a code which is technically a backdoor. So the bad guys are using the backdoor to commit crimes and using those servers for any purpose they want. So we found that there is a way to control the servers using the same backdoor, because there was no proper authentication mechanism. Even though the bad guys implemented the authentication mechanism, we could bypass it because it was badly implemented, and technically we had an opportunity to control thousands of these servers on the internet, and we could issue a command to self-remove the backdoor. But this is unauthorized access to the servers that do not belong to us. That is why we couldn't do that, because many countries would probably be very angry of us doing that, and many ISPs would object of somebody else cleaning their servers. So for us, it was a problem that we couldn't solve, and the infected servers are still there on the internet, and we never took this step.
So Gumblar remains a threat because of legal issues.
Right, absolutely.
So Vitaly, it's not only bad news though. We've had some good experiences, and there was one specific case of Shadowbot where we were able to assist with botnet remediation and maybe disinfection. Talk a little bit about some of the work we did with Shadowbot and the Dutch police, and maybe we can set the stage for how law enforcement can work with security researchers to help.
Yeah, that was a good story, and that was a good example of success. So it happened 2 years ago. In the summer, we had been contacted by law enforcement of the Netherlands. It was a national high-tech crime unit. And they contacted us and explained that they arrested a Dutch teenager who tried to sell his botnet consisting of over than 100,000 of hosts. And they took over the command and control center so that they could control all these hundreds of thousands of machines. And what they wanted to do, they wanted to mitigate the botnet. They wanted to clean all these machines. But they were afraid that the bad guys from other countries who were working together with this Dutch teenager could take over and do that quicker. So we had a time pressure, and they wanted us to develop a removal tool to be pushed to the infected hosts and be cleaned automatically. It was a tricky situation for us, and we agreed that we should provide just removal instructions, manual removal instructions for the users to clean their systems themselves. And this is what happened. The users have seen the browser being opened on their machines, and there was a web page from Dutch law enforcement explaining that their systems are infected, and they suggested to clean their machines, and they linked to our website, to Kaspersky.com, where we provided the manual steps for the removal of the malware from their systems.
It was not a perfect situation because the end user still had to actually follow the instructions and run the run the removal tool. But it's a perfect example of when there is cooperation between law enforcement and security response teams, whether it's CERTs or Kaspersky Lab or another anti-malware company. Perfect example of how there can be cooperation to make these things work. And one of your arguments is the biggest problem is the fact that the laws do not support automatic cleanup, or like you explained with Conficker and Gumblar, the law does not support ways to communicate, do unauthorized communications. So what are your recommendations? How do we fix this globally?
Well, we think that law enforcement of all nations should consider of using expertise and skills of security companies like ours, because we can develop tools, we can provide analysis, we can provide description, we can provide recommendations of how to mitigate the big threats, but we cannot take responsibility of pressing the last button in the cleaning procedure to initiate it, because in most of cases this is illegal actions. We also would like to recommend law enforcement of all nations to use the resources of infected systems. I understand that in many countries that will be illegal, but we should think of changing the laws and passing this information to the government to let law enforcement do that more actively than it can do now.
Thank you very much, Vitaly, and thank you for watching our webcast here from the Kaspersky Security Symposium here in Munich. Thank you.